accountant and political analyst. Khaya, good evening to you. Voyana Jachana, another CEO leaving another state-owned entity. We remember, of course, Pakamani Khadebe resigning from Eskom, that becoming public just a couple of weeks ago. Are there elements in common, do you think, between these two resignations?
Yes, good evening to the viewers. There are definitely common elements in relating to these two organizations, and I think for me, I had a long meeting with Vuyani a couple of months ago where he actually presented the plans that he had for SAA. He told us exactly how much money he needed and what it is that he had already done and what it is that he was planning to do. And my question at the end of this particular engagement was, do you actually have the political autonomy to do all of these things? And of course, I think when you do speak to the CEOs of state-owned enterprises, that remains the big problem in that they do not have the type of autonomy that all other executives that are running companies of the same size would enjoy. And it's that lack of autonomy which then leads to them actually just having to operate within the type of parameters that are that are not particularly competitive, and they make it very difficult for them to execute on the job that they've been hired for.
Are you suggesting then that this obviously affects companies like SAA that have competitors? In other words, if you are South African Airways and you're owned by a government, one shareholder, you just can't make decisions as quickly as, you know, a privately owned airline could, like Comair, for example.
Yeah, of course, and I think the big distinction that we always have to highlight between Eskom in particular and SAA is that this government took the decision in the early 90s that they wanted to open up the skies and make it a more liberal and an open market, which simply means that the status of SAA as a natural monopoly disappeared over the time. Now, what happens when you do allow other market participants to enter the market, they will look at what the market parameters are, and then they will decide if they can operate in that market, and over time they evolve and they're able to offer the product at a much cheaper price than a natural monopoly. And of course, that type of competition then makes it very important for the monopoly to be able to adapt to the changing market conditions and also be as flexible and nimble as its competitors. Clearly, when you're owned by a singular state shareholder, that type of flexibility does not exist. And of course, that's been SAA's great downfall. On the other hand, you've got Eskom itself, which still has a monopoly on the industry and on the market. And when people have the type of monopoly, an undisputed one, you'd assume that they'd be able to then be able to say, this is how we can run it profitably, simply because no one is competing with us. So you've got two entities for whom the laws of economics seem to have betrayed reality, because Eskom doesn't know how to run itself, even though nobody competes with it. And SAA is trying to market itself as something that can compete in a market where it's clearly ill-suited to do so. So I do think that we need to revisit that particular compact.
All right, Khaya, you talk about the laws of economics. Let's talk about the realities of politics. There'll be the argument for privatization. We've already heard Dr. Vermooten express part of that tonight. How do you think that's going to play out in the ANC and government?
Now, of course, the big problem with the ANC is that it still has this legacy attachment to what communist states used to call as the commanding heights of an economy. And of course, when we refer to the commanding heights of an economy, it's actually derived from a statement made by Stalin back in the early 1900s, where he simply said, look, even if we do open up the market, there must be parts of the economy that the state must control simply because of their importance to society at large. An electricity company, for example, will be one such company where you'd say, if we do open it up to a competition, the market participants may then charge prices that make it unfeasible for ordinary citizens to actually afford that particular product. So that's where the idea behind the commanding heights of an economy are. Unfortunately, the ANC seems to have held on to the wrong parts of the system in saying that they want to hold on to the commanding heights of an economy, and airline is no longer one of them. You'd have thought that maybe perhaps a communications company will be something that is more naturally suited to what a commanding aspect of the economy would be in this modern day. And unfortunately, they seem to be holding on to the wrong things, and I do suspect that it's probably too late for them now to reverse that trend, but the politics of the day need to adapt to the realities on the market. And if they don't, it will simply mean that the taxpayer has to keep paying. And I'm not sure if South Africans still have an ongoing appetite for paying this out.
And then, of course, we know one person at least who really does want SAA to be sold, and I'm talking about the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni. I mean, he would have his recipe. He would want to stick to it. Do you think he'll have much influence in this?
No, and I think the big problem, of course, is that he cannot operate within a vacuum. So the very first pushback he will receive is from the new Minister of Employment, Mr. Thulas Nxesi, who will simply say, well, if you do decide to shut down this particular airline, what guarantee can you provide that the labor will be absorbed elsewhere? And of course, none of the private market players are ever going to put up their heads and say we're going to absorb a workforce that is probably overcapacitated to begin with. So I do think that in spite of what economic fundamentals and economic arguments he can put on the table, he's really having to compete with the types of issues and social interests that are very, very difficult to solve. And if you have a country that has such high unemployment statistics, it will be political suicide for the ANC to then volunteer to shut down an entity that employs as many people as SAA does.
Khaya Sithole, thank you very much indeed. Political analyst and a financial analyst, a chartered accountant, with you on The Full View tonight. Plenty of news to come. Stay with us.